Good morning, all of our attendees that have joined us so far. We are just going to wait until just a little after 10 o'clock to get going, but I'm watching you all come in and we're excited to talk about ARPA this morning. So if you have any preliminary questions, please send them in the Q&A, but we will get ready shortly. Thank you. All right, good morning to everyone who has joined us. We are excited and we will begin here shortly.
Maggie, I think as people start joining, they can jump on. Since this is being recorded, we'll just go ahead and get started on time. I want to welcome you all here today. My name is Diane Fong. I'm the CEO of the Bay Area Community Foundation. And we're going to take care of a couple housekeeping details. I'm sure everyone is well versed in webinars at this point, but we're still going to do those housekeeping details. The first one is that Erin, oh, sorry, my slides are not advancing. Let me do this really quick. The first one, that we are recording this webinar. If you run into any technical difficulties like I just did, we're going to encourage you to put it in the chat box and Maggie Dwan will help you out there. Thanks, Maggie. We're also going to be using the question and answer feature. So the Q&A on the bottom menu bar is where you will post questions for the panelists. We do have plenty of time built in for Q&A. So we encourage you to ask those questions. We will be using the chat box purely to link the files that we will be sharing. But if you can't get to the chat box, please don't worry. We will be emailing out both a link to the recording as well as the files that we will be sharing with you throughout this presentation. In terms of our team, I'm guessing many of you on the call, you know our team pretty well. I've already introduced myself. We have Joni King with us today as well. She is our program officer. We have Aaron Kreitzberg, who is also a program officer that will be working on this grant program. Maddie Searing is a program associate with our organization, and she will be joining us after she returns from vacation. And then we've already introduced Maggie Dwan. She is our new donor relations and communications officer. So the one name you may not be familiar with is Ben. Ben Nymphy is expert legal counsel that we have working with us to ensure that you all are protected, as well as the community foundation, because this federal funding might be different for a lot of us, and there's different rules and requirements. So we want to make sure that everyone has the most up-to-date information and expertise to guide us as we go down this path. So Benjamin Nymphy is with Warner Norcross, and he is I guarantee you, he is an ARPA expert. So very thankful to have him a part of our team. Working behind the scenes with Ben also is Matt Nelson. So you may run across that name as well. We are going to talk a little bit about why ARPA. As we go through this webinar, we're going to talk about who's eligible to apply for these grants, what are eligible uses of these grant funds. We're going to talk about the timeline, when the application will open, when our applications due, and just the whole online process. The only way to apply for these grants is online. So we're going to go through that so there's no questions. When we began this partnership is dating back now to January of 2021, or excuse me, 2022, when we met with the county commissioners and talked about the critical role that our nonprofits have played throughout the entire pandemic. Our nonprofits, you all are training our future workforce. You are building the leaders of tomorrow. You are protecting our children. You are keeping our families fed. There's been a lot of support given to businesses and other critical industries, and we wanted to ensure that nonprofits were included in that resource allocation. So the county commissioners agreed wholeheartedly, and they have allocated up to $750,000 for nonprofit support in Bay County. This will be eligible for 501c3 and 501c19 organizations. We are calling this the Bay County ARPA Nonprofit Grant Program. With that, Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you to get into the nuts and bolts, and I'm going to let one quick cat out of the bag. The maximum grant that you can request is $50,000. So Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you for the details.
All right, thanks, Diane. Looks like I can drive now. Let's see here. There we go. All right, it works. Well, thanks for having me, everybody. Great to meet everyone virtually. And as Diane mentioned, I'm Ben Nymphy. I'm with Warner Norcross and Judd. Have had quite a bit of experience working with a lot of clients around the American Rescue Plan Act, a lot of the different facets of it. So what I'm going to do is kind of give you a brief overview of ARPA just generally. Very brief, considering it's a several hundred-page act. We won't get into a lot of details here because it will bore you. We'll be here all day, but I'll kind of give you sort of the relevant high-level overview, and then we'll get into sort of what sandbox are we playing in from a regulatory perspective for this program, because you'll hear ARPA thrown around a lot. People will throw around just that phrase or that acronym as a catch-all, and this is a very specific program with specific requirements under ARPA. So just to give you some color, ARPA is the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. President Biden signed it on the one-year anniversary of the World Health Organization declaring COVID-19 a public health emergency. It provided about $1.9 trillion to a lot of different programs across the country, and that is trillion with a T. I do remember a time, in my lifetime when congressional spending was billion with a B, and everyone kind of went, "Oh my gosh!" And now we're in the trillions with a T. So very huge funding package, lots of different ins and outs and different programs with it. But a lot of benefits too. Helped a lot. It's the design is economic recovery from COVID-19. So it provided stimulus funding. That's really the idea, to individuals, businesses, governments, and the whole purpose is to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. So you're going to see that's a theme. Kind of all the stimulus around the ARPA is related to responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. So among the many programs in ARPA, just to give you a sense, there were direct payments to individuals, lots of extended unemployment benefits, expanded tax credits. If you probably noticed when you filed your taxes last year, a lot of expansions to things like the child tax credit and things like that. Grants to small businesses. So outside of this program, there were other grant programs that are set aside for ARPA. And I underline this because sort of we're starting to narrow the picture here. The allocation of funds to state and local governments, that was called the local fiscal recovery funds. That is the box that we're playing in here, local fiscal recovery funds. That's part of the grant to Bay County that the Community Foundation is working with here. And then there's also rental assistance and housing assistance programs through HUD and other programs like that. So I have heard people throw around, like I said, ARPA in relation to the HUD programs and rental assistance programs. This is dealing with specifically the local fiscal recovery funds. So just as background there. So for this program, let's make it a little bit narrower. So we're in the sort of local fiscal recovery fund box. Within that box, what's the smaller area that we're sort of playing in here? And that is the ARPA regulations related to permitting assistance to nonprofit organizations, and that includes grants. So this program and this is the purpose, to mitigate financial hardship related to COVID-19. So that's kind of the key phrase that we're looking at here. The purpose of this program is to sort of mitigate financial hardship that is related to COVID-19. So remember that underlined phrase, kind of burn it in as you're completing your applications and things like that. That's kind of what this purpose is. So grants awarded under this specific program to applicants that are awarded, it's for the purpose is, like I said, addressing negative economic impact. So this is negative economic impact arising from COVID-19. And nonprofit, that can mean various things in various contexts. In this specific context, Treasury's defined a nonprofit as a 501c3 or 501c19. So no 501c8s, no 501c4s. This program is 501c3, 501c19 organizations only. So, and one thing I should add on that previous slide, I'm driving, so I can go back. So I'm not used to this. This is nice. One thing I will mention is one of the requirements under this program specifically and under the Treasury regulations is that any response using local fiscal recovery fund dollars has to be reasonably proportional to the damage suffered or the financial harm suffered. So that's kind of working in the background in the eligibility and in the application determinations. All responses have to be reasonably proportional. So just so you're aware of that. So I'm going to kind of get into, so now that we've narrowed it down, we're looking at financial hardship that's COVID related. What are some examples of financial hardship? How can your organization show, as you're preparing your application, how you've experienced financial hardship related to COVID-19? So this is not an exhaustive list, but these are kind of the bullet points that I think are helpful as you're thinking about how you can demonstrate that financial hardship. So decreased revenues is obviously the most obvious one. Many organizations during COVID-19 experienced a reduction in revenue for various reasons related to the pandemic. Shutdowns, difficulty finding staff, difficulty finding volunteers. It was a very uncertain economic time, still is for many organizations, for most organizations, still a very uncertain time, lots of economic uncertainty. So decreased revenues, reduction in donations, reduction in fees received from members and participants and things like that. So that's one way financial hardship can be shown. Increased cost, kind of the other end of that spectrum. That's another one. I mean, I think I can at least speak anecdotally, and I'm sure I can find statistics to back this up, that everybody is experiencing increased costs right now. Provided that there is a tie to the COVID-19 pandemic, increased cost is certainly a way you can demonstrate financial hardship under the ARPA rules. And kind of going along with that, just to mention it separately, challenges covering payroll, rent, and mortgage. and other operating costs that are related to, again, related to that COVID-19 caused financial hardship. Those would certainly be ways you could demonstrate financial difficulty. Reduced capacity to weather financial difficulties in the future. Difficulty finding and retaining staff. Like I said, I think that is that's a common one that I hear quite a bit. Staff is very hard to retain right now. Talent is difficult to find and to keep. But again, just to hammer this point home, the financial hardship that we're demonstrating here with this program must be related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I should underline this, it has to be current and continuing through 2023. So the idea here is that successful applicants have continued to experience financial hardship as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is not for expenses previously incurred. This is sort of on a go forward basis related to ongoing financial difficulties suffered by your organizations. So there are other programs that exist in the state and things like that related to reimbursement and past expenses. This is not that program. So I saw a question pop up and we'll grab that one as we go through the Q&A a little bit later. Thank you for your question. So who can apply? We kind of talked about ways you could demonstrate financial hardship. Who can apply? Again, 501c3 and 501c19 organizations that have to have been in operation on or before March 1, 2020, and that is pre-pandemic. Can't have come into existence post-pandemic. So there has to have been ongoing operations before that date. And this will be clearer, and Joni might get into this a little bit, but in the application materials that you'll see. But just to kind of give you an overview of the types of organizations that are eligible, you must have a physical location in Bay County. Your organization has to serve Bay County residents. And on the application, you will need to be able to certify that your organization has experienced and continues to experience. You will project the continued financial difficulties going forward in Bay County as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So those are kind of the three of the key eligibility requirements. And your organization has to be, and these ones should seem obvious, but we will mention them anyway. You can't be debarred by the federal government, and that's one actually it does come up. So it is one that we have to say, but your organization. So that's a clear requirement from the U.S. Treasury. Any federal funds, you can't be debarred from receiving federal funds. Your organization won't be eligible, and there could be no delinquent federal or state tax filings. Or license violations of any kind at the time of the award. And then your organization cannot currently be in bankruptcy proceedings. So those are kind of really key eligibility requirements for this particular program. Again, this is similar to the last slide, but just to reemphasize what organizations cannot apply. And that would be really clearly nonprofit organizations that aren't 501c3s and 501c19s. That is not a community foundation requirement. That's not a county requirement. That is a federal requirement for these types of grants. So it has to be those types of nonprofit organizations, those tax statuses. Organizations that don't have physical locations in Bay County or a physical location in Bay County, those organizations are not eligible for this program. Schools, government entities, public entities of any kind, private entities or private foundations that are non-operating, and then fiscal agents and individuals not eligible for this program as well. And then any nonprofit organization, this is sort of a catch-all, but it's important, nonprofits that are otherwise prohibited to receive funds under either state or federal law. So this is kind of probably what everybody's asking. So what is eligible? I mean, what can we spend, what can your organization spend funds on a go-forward basis? And the idea here is ongoing financial hardship as a result of COVID-19. And these are the three categories on which these grant funds, should you be successful in your application, be spent on. And that's payroll, rent and mortgage, and operating costs. So ongoing operating costs, payroll, rent, and mortgage. Those are the three key categories here that this program is designed to address. And then, of course, on the flip side of that coin, what is ineligible? So that's all even more fun to talk about. So we've got, these are many of these, in fact, most of these come directly from the Treasury regulations and from the language of ARPA itself. And so these are federal requirements in many cases. But what expenses are going to be clearly ineligible under this program? So employee and director bonuses. And I think that should be obvious, but if bonuses are being paid, that doesn't really speak to the financial hardship. So that's not really addressing, that's kind of the purpose there. Additional charitable contributions, salary to board members. Again, that's kind of view that as outside of the general scope of payroll, like ongoing payroll expenses. Salary to board members, not eligible under this program. Any political contributions, that's actually a federal requirement. These federal funds can't be used to make political contributions of any kind. Debt service, and that's not counting your typical kind of ongoing mortgage payment. That is acceptable, but funding for debts incurred outside of your typical sort of mortgage payments are not eligible. Capital expenditures are not going to be eligible under this program, and we're going to use the federal definition of capital expenditures, which, Diane, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that is $5,000 and a useful life of more than 1 year would be a capital expenditure, as I recall. So those are that's sort of not that's outside the scope of a general operating expense or ongoing. The idea here, again, financial hardship, ongoing issues. A capital expenditure doesn't really fit into that category. And then this is an important one because it does come up relatively frequently. So just kind of to head this question off beforehand, expenses that are paid or have already been reimbursed through PPP loans, any federal program or state grant program, EIDL loans, EIDL target funds, CARES Act funds, or another ARPA grant, such as through Bay City or another government entity. That would be colloquially kind of refer to that as double dipping, but that is no federal funds can be used to pay the same expense twice. And although that makes intuitive sense, I know there's lots of grant programs flying around, and it's easy to sort of make that, it can be difficult to make that distinction, but this cannot be for expenses that have already been paid or already funded through some kind of federal funds. Contributions to a rainy day fund or a pension fund, those are ineligible expenses under this program. And just to this has come up before, and it kind of came up in our discussions about these slides earlier, but just to head this question off, if you're using the funds to pay payroll, ongoing regular contributions to like a 403B or like a 401, I know 401k wouldn't apply here, but a general retirement plan that are sort of part of the ordinary course, that is acceptable. But the idea here is contributions to pension funds that are outside the ordinary course, that are extraordinary, that is ineligible to be used with this program. Just to give you a little bit of inside baseball here, I remember when this was being negotiated in Congress, everybody, of course, each party has their hot button issue that they're trying to, to address and show their constituents that they're addressing. And the Republicans, why this came up was because there are local governments, city governments, large cities like Los Angeles, Chicago is a good example, that have multi-million, sometimes billion-dollar pension shortfalls. And the idea was, the reason this restriction exists is so that this money doesn't directly go to meet those pension obligations for really large cities. So most likely not applicable here, but just to bring it up, it is a clear ARPA restriction. Again, this goes along with that sort of double dipping theme that we discussed earlier, but damages that have already been covered by insurance. So something that's already been covered through another source, you can't use this to supplement that and pay for it twice. That kind of makes intuitive sense, but if it's already been covered by insurance, not eligible as a use category here. Gifts or parties, again, if this is being spent on something extraordinary, that's a gift or a party outside the ordinary operating expenses, that kind of shows that there's not as much financial hardship. So that's kind of one of the reasons that that's there. And then litigation expenses and legal settlements, those are clear Treasury restrictions. These funds can't be used for those purposes. I know that sounds like a long list. A lot of them are sort of common sense restrictions, though. I think they make sense, but if you have any questions, please let me know. And I think we'll take a mid break here for questions if we want to address some midstream.
Yep, and there are a few in the chat box. So one, I think you did end up answering it. The question was posted and then you talked about it, Ben. They talked about, is the requirement of hardship through 2023. Can we explain that some? So do you want to expand at all upon that, Ben?
Sure. I mean, so this program specifically, again, is for ongoing financial hardship. I think you'll see in your application materials that it'll be for, I believe it's November 1st, 2022 through 2023. So you'll be, one of the parts of the application is to project ongoing financial hardship that's related to COVID-19. So that would include 2023. But it sort of depends, on the size of the grant and what's proportional to the harm suffered, how long the financial hardship exists. So it'll be a little bit of a case-by-case basis, but to answer your question, I mean, yes, ongoing financial hardship through 2023 would be eligible.
Mm-hmm. And remember, there's lots of ways you can document financial hardship. So it could be that you've had, one was a decreased ability to weather financial uncertainty. So that could be that you've been tapping into your reserve fund and your operating reserve fund has been depleted. So know that there are ways you can prove that you've been financially impacted. The next question, Joni, I'm going to throw this one to you, please. How would you advise organizations demonstrate the difficulty to attract or retain staff due to the COVID-19 pandemic?
So that's a good question. I just want to mention on the application, you are going to have a couple of different questions to demonstrate your hardship. You will have text, so you will be able to fully describe your situation. And you'll also have some other yes or no questions. So demonstrating that might be, you have open positions. When were they open? Why did people leave? How long has your position been open? I know of some nonprofits that have had open positions for at least 6 to 9 months and they still are unfilled. So you would look at those types of items.
Okay. Lindsay Eggers is wondering, what about computers for reimbursement? Typically not seen as a capital expense. Joni?
Sure, I can answer that. So again, our definition of a capital expense is over $5,000 and it has a life of more than 1 year. So if you have, go ahead, Diane.
I was going to say, so if you have one computer that costs $2,500, you would be under that threshold. Okay.
Correct.
Mike Batchgalupa is asking, is the payroll a reimbursement program and are utilities paid directly to the vendor? You want to take that, Joni, or you want me to grab it?
Sure. So I can answer the second part. I'll let you answer the first one.
Okay.
Utilities are not paid directly to the vendor. We will actually be cutting a check to the nonprofit.
And then is this a reimbursement program? No, we are funding prospectively. So you would be looking at payroll expenses from November 1st, 2020 through the end of December 2023. So we anticipate that we will be cutting grant payments in 2 separate checks. So that would be the only way you might potentially view it as a reimbursement. But we are doing typical level grant investments, right? So you're not documenting that you've paid all these expenses. You're anticipating that you're going to pay and you will have grant funding for that. I know there's some questions I'm seeing coming through the chat, so I'm going to try to pick those up for us. Can you apply for this grant if you were awarded a Bay City nonprofit relief grant? Joni?
The answer is yes. Again, the city's program was for reimbursement before our grant period, which is again November 1st, 2022. So as long as those expenses are not double dipping, you're eligible to apply.
I'll take this next question. Is the restriction on capital expenditures an ARPA restriction or a program restriction? And I will tell you, it's a combination of both. And the reason being, for capital expenditures, there are very specific requirements for these federal funds. If it is for a building, there would have to be a lien placed on the property in the name of the county. We would have to document and verify that all of the county's bidding procedures and policies were followed. It is a level of expenditure responsibility that we are not able to handle. So our goal and intention with this program was to ensure that nonprofits have the resources to recover from the pandemic, not necessarily to improve their physical locations. There is a question, I think we did answer it, but we'll touch on it again, Joni. What will be the time frame we can request funds to go through? Meaning 6 months of mortgage or payroll or 3 months, etc.
So expenses are November 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2023. Any expenses during that period would be eligible.
We have a question from Gail Fromm. I understand the question about getting or retaining employees, but the slide also mentioned volunteers. How does one put a cost on the loss of volunteers? That was huge for us. Joni?
So Gail, you are in the same position as a lot of other organizations. People, as a result of COVID, aren't as willing to volunteer for your organization. So we're going to want you to quantify that. You know, what service are they providing? If you had to hire somebody, that would be one way of quantifying volunteers. And
another way,
you're in, go ahead, Diane.
No, I apologize, Joni. Another way, Gail, if you know that volunteers gave you 100 hours every year and now you're only getting 50 hours, there's formulas out there where you can quantify the cost per hour, you know, that it would be for an employee. Or so maybe $20 an hour times those 50 hours less that you're receiving. And our staff, so Joni, Aaron, and Maddie, as you guys are filling out your proposals, you can call and we will help you, you know, work through these items. Don't wait until the last day though. Joni, did you have
That's
anything
exactly
to
what
add?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is that we're here to help you through your individual situation. And some of your situations are very unique. And so we can help you work through, how do you show that hardship? How do you quantify it? So keep in mind, we're here to help.
We have a question, and Ben, I'm gonna call on you.
Sure.
To improve staff retention, would an employee wellness program be eligible under this grant program? Program may include grocery gift certificates, gym membership credits, etc., all as a part of a wellness program to retain staff.
I think that, you know, you have to look at, of course, and as Joni and Diane said, you know, every application is going to kind of be looked at holistically and based on the financial hardship experienced by the organization. So I think in general principle, it's possible that something like that could be eligible, but I would say, you know, I would look at, you know, what are the quantifiable financial hardships that your organization is experiencing, and kind of how is that response reasonably proportional to the harm suffered? You know, and so that's a key ingredient under ARPA. And so you'd kind of have to weigh the proportionality of that response to the actual financial hardships. So I think you'd have to be really diligent in documenting what that financial cost is or financial hardship is related to your retention in order to quantify something like that.
Okay. We've gotten a question: who makes decisions about the awards? Is it BACF or the County Commission? I'll go ahead and grab that one. It is the Bay Area Community Foundation. We do have a community advisory panel of our board members and some of our grants committee members that will be reviewing all of the applications that are determined eligible. Eligibility will be determined by staff in consultation with legal counsel from Warner, Norcross, and Judd. So once you make it through that eligibility test, it will go to the community-based review committee. They will make funding recommendations to the Bay Area Community Foundation Board of Trustees. Those recommendations will be acted upon on November 1st, and then they will be announced. And our next spot, as we finish up Q&A, we're going to go into the actual timeline and process. So I'm going to see if there's any more questions now. We also have time for questions once Joni finishes the process discussion. Okay, so keep those questions coming. Joni, I'm going to flip it over to you now.
Great, thank you, Diane. All right, in front of you, you have the nuts and bolts, the timeline of the grant process. And these dates are very important. So we wanted to touch upon these dates so that you're well aware of when things are due and when you have to have things ready. So the first date is August 16th. We are rolling out the guidelines for you in this webinar. After the webinar, we will be sending you a link to the recording of this video, but we'll also be sending you the full 7-page guidelines. So all of the information that is in the slides today, as well as some additional information, will be emailed to you. The next date is the application actually opens next Monday. So you do have some time to look over those guidelines, maybe prepare some of your information. As you know, most grantees, our grantees usually work offline, get their answers all set in Word, and then they'll copy and paste in the grant application. So after you receive the guidelines today, you can start preparing. The next date is we are having an additional in-person information session on August 30th. You may wonder, do I need to attend that one? Only if you have questions that haven't been answered. The information will be very similar to what we talked about today. The next date is September 22nd at 5 p.m. That is when the application is due. And again, this deadline is firm. We will not be granting any extensions. And I'll get on my program officer soapbox a little bit today, and I'll let you know that plan ahead for technical issues, plan ahead for answering questions that you may not have thought of. Submit your grant application ahead of time. Keep in mind, those are all good things to do on any grant opportunity, but in particular this one, because there will not be any extensions. So then after the submission of your grant application, we will then work with our review committee, and they'll make recommendations to our board of trustees. And on November 1st, they will make those final decisions. The month of November, we will be meeting with you to go over your beneficiary agreement if you are awarded a grant, and answer any questions about the execution of the grant. The last date is December 31st, 2023. All grant funds must be expended. So that's kind of the deadline. There will not be an extension on can we have another year to use those funds. So keep in mind that those deadlines are important, and you may want to write those in your calendars to make sure you're aware of them. Again, September 22nd, 5 p.m. is the submission deadline. How to apply. So many of you are aware that over the summer, we have installed a new grant system. It is pretty spectacular, I have to tell you. I'm very excited for our past grantees as well as our future grantees to use the system. You will find it much easier to use than our last system. So you are going to find our grants portal, and that is where you want to access the application on our website. So if you're looking at the slide, you'll see that little arrow. This is at the top page of our website. And so you're going to click on grants portal. That will then take you to a page where you're going to create an account. Keep in mind that if you create an account in our former grants portal, it will not transfer to the new system. So everyone will have to make a new account. So that's the most popular question is I'm using my password from the old portal and it's not working. You got to make a new account, but it's much easier. You don't have to have that account approved. You can move right on to the next page, which is once you register, you will go to the apply page. This apply page will list all of our grant opportunities. You're going to want to select the ARPA grant opportunity. Click apply and start the process. So again, that application will be available at 9 a.m. on Monday, which is August 22nd. Checking my notes, make sure I didn't forget anything. So we touched upon this earlier about the evaluation criteria. Again, staff is going to work with you to make sure that your application is eligible. Once that is eligible and complete application, those will go to our review committee, and they're going to look at these 5 different elements in those applications. So these are also outlined in your guidelines that we'll be emailing you. I did that pretty quick, and I'm trying to see if I can get back. Nope. Maggie, thank you. They only told me how to go forward, not to go back. So I do have to admit, a little technical challenge today, but thank you for your assistance, Maggie. So evaluation criteria. Again, oh goodness, I did it again. Maggie. So we want to make sure, I'm trying to move something. There we go. Clearly state and specific information relative to the pandemic's negative impact. Again, the negative impact is very important. Organization provides and continues to provide services to Bay County's well-being. Again, your organization may serve other counties. We are specifically looking at your services as they pertain to Bay County. Organizations find fiscal and administrative capacity. We want to make sure that you can execute this grant, and we'll be looking at that in your application. Demonstrate your ability to sustain grant-funded efforts beyond the grant period. So as an example, we had a question earlier about an employee wellness program. So if you're going to continue this for the grant period, which is just over a year, how are you going to continue that after the grant period? So we're going to be looking at what you're asking to apply for and if it's going to be able to be continued. Again, sustainability. And again, we want to make sure that you show long-term commitment to Bay County. And I think most of the nonprofits who are on today can do that. Okay, now we're going to go to the next slide. Okay, so there's a lot of information that you received today, and we understand that it can be overwhelming. We're here to help. We have 3 BACF staff members who are dedicated to answering your questions and working with you through this process. Of course, myself and Erin Kreitzberg and Maddie Searing will be available. We suggest that you call the office and you'll be directed to one of us, to whoever's available. So we will make sure that we are there to assist you. Okay, before we go to wrapping this up, I want to take another opportunity to talk about questions or answer any questions. Goodness, I'm sorry, Maddie, I did it again.
So I'm Joni, there are a couple additional questions. Someone said, what is a beneficiary agreement? Is that a grant agreement? Do you want to take that or do you want me to grab it?
I'll let you go ahead and take that because that is different than our regular grants.
Yeah. So for those of you who've received grants from us before, it's a very simple grant agreement. The beneficiary agreement is actually something that has been drafted by the county so that it would be in compliance with federal requirements. You know, for example, that capital definition of 5,000 and more than a year, that's coming from auditors for federal audits. So those are all of the rules and regulations that we're looking at. So the beneficiary agreement goes into all of those details. And it talks about, you know, if you were to be found that you had, I'm going to say lied on your application, which we know no one here would do, that there is the potential for the county or the foundation to try to recoup those costs. So it's a little more detailed, more legalese than you are used to from us. So that is also why we brought on Ben and Matt Nelson to help make sure that all of our nonprofit partners were feeling comfortable signing those beneficiary agreements. So it really is just like the grant agreement, but with more legal jargon. Not that there's anything against legal jargon, Ben.
No offense taken.
Another question about bonuses versus retention payments to keep employees. Do you want to grab that one, Ben?
Sure. I mean, I think, again, everything's a little bit case by case, so it depends on what exactly you know, the proportion is and the reference point is. But you know, a bonus, particularly a bonus to like a director or a person in an executive role, versus retention payments for just like general payroll expenses or the increased cost of retention of sort of your rank and file employees and people who provide you with services. I think there is a distinction there. It's hard to draw a bright line, exactly what that is, but the purpose of these grants is really, you know, ongoing financial hardship. And if a large bonus to a person in a leadership role it doesn't really demonstrate the same financial hardship as ongoing increased cost of payroll to retain sort of your day-to-day employees. So that's kind of a long way of answering, but it is sort of a case-by-case basis. So there is a difference there, but it'll kind of be evaluated individually.
We have a couple more questions in the chat. It says, Joni mentioned that the organization may be regional, but the funds have to be for Bay County operations. However, earlier it was said that the organization must have a physical location in Bay County. Please verify. Joan?
So that's a good question. You have to have both. So you need to serve Bay County residents and you must have a physical location here. So if you are headquartered out of, say, Saginaw or Midland, maybe you have a branch office here if you're a regional type of nonprofit. So we're looking at both of those criteria.
Okay. This question, I'm not sure. I'm going to look for someone to raise their hand. This may be an answer I should know, but are these funds different from the EFSP Phase 39 and ARPA-R funding that was available through the United Way of Bay County? I am not familiar with those acronyms, but what I can say, oh, Nicole Luzak is from United Way of Bay County is on this. She said, yes, these are different funds. Another question. Yeah, thanks. What will grant reporting look like? Joni?
Sure, grant reporting is going to be much more robust than our usual grants. We are going to be going over those details when we go over the beneficiary agreement. So you will know right up front what they are. And just keep in mind that this is a different grant opportunity and it'll be much more robust.
Yep. And I'll just add a little background and context to that. So when we say robust, we don't mean you're going to have to provide receipts for all of your expenditures. That is not a requirement. We do not anticipate that our organization will have to go through a federal single audit. So when we say robust, we're going to ask for a midterm report of here were the cost projections you anticipated using these grant funds for. So midway through your program, we're going to ask you to report on how is all of that shaping up. For example, if you asked for payroll money to hire 3 new staff and you haven't been able to hire them, we would need to know that. So there will be a midterm report and then a final report. We will not, at this point in time, we have been given 0 indication that we will need to have receipts for every single expenditure, okay? My nonprofit started in February 2021. Does that mean we do not qualify to apply? And I would say based on the guidelines, and that is not our guidelines, those are from the federal government, that no, you are not eligible to apply. Ben, do you have any other thoughts on that one?
No, that's, I mean, if the entity was formed and it's a brand new entity formed sort of post pandemic, there has to be, I believe the date we had was March of 2020. So it has to be, there have to have been operations prior to March of 2020. So formed in 2021 would not be eligible for this program.
Okay, we have a question. Must the nonprofit serve Bay County residents exclusively in order to be eligible for this grant? Okay, so Joni is shaking her head no. So I'm also going to add to that, these funds came from Bay County. So it is critical that they only be used for services for Bay County residents. That's just the proper use of the county commission's dollars. Anything you want to add, Joni, on that? Good, okay.
No, that's a good reason.
Okay. How many nonprofit organizations do we estimate are eligible in Bay County to apply? This is from Keith Birchler. I actually had pulled off of GuideStar and IRS's publication how many nonprofits are registered in Bay County. And at one point, there's well over 500. I want to say it was over 700. Now, do I really think those organizations are all going to apply? Absolutely not. Many of them don't even have staff. And we're talking about funding operating costs. And they have to have the physical location, right? So if it's a nonprofit that really has just been formulated and is working out of their kitchen, they're not going to be eligible for this type of funding. This question, I know we've been having lots of conversation on it offline. It says, if your organization's mailing address is the CMU RC Co-op workspace, and that is your organization's main office, does that qualify as a physical location? And I will say that question has been noted. Joni, I don't know if we have any more information on that or if we're just going to get back.
We'll talk specifically with that nonprofit, but
Okay.
for those of you on the call, we're really looking at that physical location. What business is being done there? Are you doing business out of that physical location?
Okay. Maggie, I am not seeing any more questions in the Q&A nor in the chat. Does it look like we're clear?
Yep, all good to me. I don't see any unanswered questions either.
All right, thank you. So questions may come up, as Joni said. We are all here and ready to answer your questions. Encourage you at the application guidelines and questions have been put into the chat box. So if you've downloaded them from there, great. If not, again, you're going to get an email from us. You're going to be able to go to our website and download those. Start working soon, right? So don't wait till the last minute. We encourage you to start working, because if you are doing work on it between now and when we have the virtual in-person, or not virtual in-person, but that makes no sense. By the time we have our in-person workshop, bring your questions then, and we can help you. I just want to thank Ben and the entire team at the Community Foundation and the County Board of Commissioners and all of the staff from the county, because this has been new water we've all been swimming through together, and incredibly thankful for the extra hours that everyone's been putting in on this. So those are my final comments. Joni, do you want to close us out with anything else?
No, I just want to remind people that if you don't see the email from us, check your spam or your junk box. But again, this information will be on our website too. So either way, you can get the information that you need.
All right. Thank you all so very much. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to getting applications from you all. And yes, we will send the recording soon. We will send it today. All right. Thank you all.